Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live. I've been saying FaceTime Live lately, so in case I say FaceTime Live too, because I FaceTime with my kids, you'll know that I mean by Facebook Live. So welcome, my name is Joan Gracie, and I'm here with my strategic partner, Erickson, and I'm going to let him do his own little mini bio. But I'm here to chat with you today as a participant in our Mindset Matters approximately 30-minute time where we discuss brain-based / neuroscientific principles as it relates to leadership development. And Eric and I have collaborated on a super fascinating project for a national service company, and we thought this would be kind of a great jumpstart to a topic that I have to tell you, Eric, I have got so many emails about, so many tweets about, so many direct questions, so I don't know if everybody's going to be participating, but boy, do I have such a separation from what HR people had interacted with me about versus like presidents of companies, leaders, how they look at our topics. So when you talk about that mental disconnect, how prevalent that is, especially when it comes to this particular issue that we're going to be sharing today. And so our topic is to survey or not to survey. Should that be the question? This is where I get my acting out that totally drives my family crazy. So the question is to survey or not to survey. Should that be the question? And I'm going to explain why we chose should that be the question. We're going to be chatting about that throughout our half hour. But I'm going to let you do your introduction so that you can share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your new little baby.
I know. So our baby Ellie is now 3 weeks old. So absolutely adorable in every
so
way.
She's cute.
The
kid is cute.
Yeah, I think I'm biased. I mean, certainly.
I think you're mentally biased.
Yes, and she's great. But I mean, honestly, I've loved these talks over the last few months because it's a great opportunity for me to not only keep myself up to date with this research, but also with our daughter now being born, like seeing what impact it has for her. And that was something we mentioned at the last talk about how stereotype bias and stereotype threat can impact that. And so for her, really making sure that she's aware of that and other people are aware of that as well. Because one of the things that I bring to the table is really more of a data-driven approach to trying to solve problems, here being in the human capital space. So how is it that there could be a disconnect from our own biases, from, like you mentioned, the presidents of these companies, CEOs, to HR, down to the employees. And at every level, sometimes there seems to be a disconnect between what one person thinks should be the direction to go, and then lo and behold, that's not actually what's happening at the level of the employees on the floor or those in the HR department. So I think what's important is then letting the data speak to the problem and letting the data really drive the decisions and really just highlighting for other people that sometimes you need that other individual to come in and provide that extra perspective because you wouldn't have thought of it.
Yeah, and I think with you being in the PhD world and coming from the university sector, and my background being in identification of impact performers, retention of impact performers, development of impact performers, it's scary because obviously we have our own little research center and we recognize the importance of math and science. But I think what has freaked me out in our interaction is how accurate my internal data has been. So what's great about when you and I collaborate, you're like, don't tell me anything, don't give me any context. Let's pretend this is a lab and you dropped off the sample and let me analyze it. All right, but I don't want you to give me any preconceived notions. And like in the case of this particular survey, it was crazy how you came to the mathematical realization that I came to without the mathematical realizations. And I think that's a super hard thing to do because obviously my 3-pound command center is not perfect and I have biases and opinions with my decades of experience. But I certainly noticed that there were things awry within this organization and I certainly had very distinct guesses. and it was just fascinating to me about how it validated it through your research. So I want to read you, because Austin I didn't allow me to have my full soliloquy in social media. So this is how I did it. This is how I did it. So, to survey or not to survey? Should that be the question? Whether 'tis nobler in the leadership mind to suffer disengagement, the slings and arrows of Glassdoor reviews, or to take action against a sea of people issues, and by listening to employees' opinions end it, to deny turnover, recruitment issues, no more, and by day we end the heartache and the millions lost. But I mean, I gotta tell you, I should be trending.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I just think that was. What were your thoughts?
Well, and I really think it parallels what we had talked about last time in the Facebook Live session about how there's always a certain preference our mind has when it comes to any type of threat, any type of stress. And so if you think of it from the employer, the owner's perspective, who are you to tell me that I'm not doing a great job? It's like, again, it's your brainchild. It's my own child, so I put myself in that situation. You're telling me that my kid's not cute? Oh, no. There's no way that I'm going to deal with that. And so for these owners at these companies, you're going to tell me that I'm doing something wrong? No. Who are you? And sometimes it, though, takes that outside perspective and our willingness to accept feedback in order to get the most out of these projects. Because interestingly enough, with that one that we just worked on, and you're right, independently, we kind of came to very similar conclusions. It really reflected that what necessarily the employer thought and wanted to look into wasn't really what was resonating with the employees. And let's face it, they're the ones who are doing the day-to-day business. They're the ones who are making sure that the ship stays upright. They're the one making sure it still runs. And at the end of the day, certainly, the employers have to make the decisions. They're the ones who are going to decide what the future is going to be. But think of how much better that future could be with input coming from the employees.
Yeah.
And letting it now be an environment where my impact can resonate, where I feel that I can now make an impact. My voice is heard. And sometimes we have to take that willingness to step out of our comfort zone, do that growth mindset mentality, and take some of that feedback. Because I think it's extremely valuable. It's fun for me to see when there's differences, but now to see them actually play out would be great.
And I think it was interesting as I was getting the feedback from the individuals. The first part of it is, to survey or not to survey, should that be the question? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I was so struck by that is basically because of the fact that surveys, kind of like DISC assessments or Myers-Briggs or whatever the case may be, have become these acceptable mechanisms by which to get a pulse, right?
Yep.
So if you're going to have a pulse, you could still be on some type of form of life support, unconscious, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is should you survey if you're not prepared to do anything with the data?
Yeah, and I think not only that, also seeing how you're going to construct your survey. Mm-hmm. So it's like, again, I could paint my car a fresh new coat, I could get it washed, but underneath the hood there could be issues awry. And if I'm not willing to put in the effort to get it fixed, to make sure it's properly running, you're just really wasting your time. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right, that it really does have to first be decided and discussed. One, are we creating the most effective tool? And two, are we going to do anything with it?
Yeah, and that's what I heard from the HR people. They were like, we hate when we have to hear the word survey because we know what's going to happen. And you know what? We have to deal with the fallout. Mm. And it's this flavor of the month. Let's get a pulse on what everybody's thinking and feeling, when at the end of the day, if very frankly it pisses off upper management, they find it offensive, whatever the case may be, they're going to just really ignore it. And I think that, again, from a neuroscientific standpoint, from a brain-based standpoint, if you want to take a worker, an employee to empowerment or to reward, it's wonderful to ask an opinion. Mm-hmm. But it's horrible if you never look at the outcome of that, or if you ignore it. And that's what we see. We see that people do these surveys, and people are like, what happened? Like, what happened to the we never talked about it again.
Right.
And I think, again, it gets into this whole denial piece. It's not what I hoped it would be. It's not what I wanted it to be. So if you're going to be administering a survey, you have to make sure that you have the infrastructure by which to act upon it in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
And especially through communication, because trust is such an important part of building an engaged workforce today. And I can't tell you how many companies lose trust just because they never acknowledge a survey again after it's been done.
Right. And it seems, I mean, I always say, think of your company, think of your business as you, health-wise. So we may go for our yearly checkup and think of that as your survey. And that survey can produce really interesting results. But if you don't do anything with that checkup, that's where then the complications are going to start snowballing. And you might get to a point now where you wish you would have then made that change. You wish you would have taken that input. And it's like, why not? You spent all that time and effort to run the survey. You spent the time and effort to go get the checkup. Why aren't you going to listen to the doctor's input? You know, why wait until you're in the hospital now having to do all these measures to try to right the ship when you could have been proactively trying to make these changes? And I think that's where it's challenging to look at it that way, but it's a good opportunity to take the necessary advancements before the issues start to arise.
Well, and I think I love your analogy, but I think what's so cool about it is that, you know, in the context of my work, I always try to get an individual. You mentioned the entrepreneur who's built this business almost like for this child and now is responsible for raising and nurturing and growing and all the attributes and contributions you have to make to the lifeblood of a noble citizen, if you will. But I think in so many instances, it's healthier if we can disassociate ourselves away from the business and make it an entity on its own.
Yeah.
And when I do that with a company, and I always refer to it more as a cruise line because people can visually identify with that. And if you've taken a cruise, the experience and knowing that you want to get to each port right side up, right?
Yeah.
Versus upside down type of thing. One of those goals. I think, again, it provides for them the ability to disassociate, because what I find in that threat zone is that owners take it personally. Managers take it personally. It's like a 360 review. Well, they take it personally versus saying, wait a minute, here's somebody who's trying to help me build a more powerful entity. So it's kind of like sending your kid off to school and hoping that your educators are going to contribute to that.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And I think it takes a village to raise a company. And I think in so many instances, entrepreneurs can't let go of that because they consider a village offensive. And I think HR people are really caught in that struggle because they want to be organizational developers, but they're still looked at so much from this tactical standpoint.
Right.
And then they have to deal with the aftermath. And I think, again, this is what I've learned from you, in doing the survey and having those reverse questions, even to see if people are going through the motions of doing a survey, or if we're catching them really in their tracks and saying, you know what, you did the survey and check that off, but I'm telling you right now, they're being dishonest.
Exactly.
And that's what we found in this particular case study, is that we found that there was reverse questions. And explain what a reverse question is.
Yeah, these reverse scored items is kind of a check that you could use to figure out if people are being honest with a survey. And I'm like, always put yourself in your person's shoes that you're going to survey. So you go to the mall, for example, and someone asks you, can you do a quick survey? And you're like, okay, sure. Are you really putting 100% effort into it? Or are you just trying to think of, what's the quickest way for me to answer these questions? What does that person just want to hear? Let me just write down what they want to hear. So if, for example, there's a certain flavor ice cream that you want to figure out people like, well, you do one question that says, do you enjoy chocolate ice cream? Yes or no. Or absolutely true, moderately true, etc. Go all the way through. Then what you would do is later on say, do you hate chocolate ice cream? And if someone's just going through the motions, then they're probably going to respond to both they love it and hate it. Well, how is that possible? You can't both love and hate the same thing that you're talking about. So by having that reverse scored item, it allows you now to be able to see if a person's genuine with their responses, or are they just going through the motions. Now certainly there's other checks that you need to employ to do that, but that's kind of in a basic overview, the ability to see if someone's being honest with those particular results.
And I think that was what was so interesting, because we collaborated with this national company. We let them give us survey questions. And then we said, okay, you know, we got it. You want to find out this fundamental knowledge. But then you PhDized them. Right? But you did. And you were able to use like this math and scientific approach to ask questions as a direct compliment, but what we were able to derive from just those few additional questions were so telling
Yeah.
to, what is really happening within the confines of that organization.
And that's where I think it's so vital to have someone else's perspective on the development of these, because many of us, if not all of us, succumb to what's called confirmation bias. And you can see that when we create a survey, my intuition would be, well, I'm going to ask a whole series of questions for me to now show and demonstrate what I think I'm going to already find about this particular survey.
What I want to find.
But it's like, what's the point then of your survey? If you already felt that way, then you're just
Right.
getting data to reaffirm it.
Right.
It's not giving you anything new. But now if you start to ask questions that are the opposite of that, or in slightly different ways, making sure that they're then good, solid questions, now you're getting the full picture. And that full picture, again, from the results that we studied, that's where I think there are more interesting results that should help to now improve if, again, you're willing to adopt those changes going into the future.
Without a doubt. And I think that, as we're looking at these survey results, what's so neat about it is how organically we now can weave this into every single aspect of their organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about now how we can share with them, based on the data, what an impact performer truly looks like versus
Yeah.
what they thought it looked like,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And they've been advertising this way and on the job boards this way and going after what they thought again. And I don't know whether this falls under confirmation bias or some other type, because obviously there's a multitude of different biases that litter our mindset. But they're identifying what they think is a perfect candidate,
Mm-hmm.
again, from their frame of reference, from their mindset, right? Versus now being able to say, wow, this really is who an impact performer is.
Right.
And think about how that could change the scope of their identification. Is it going to make a difference to their turnover? Absolutely, because they're now advertising differently. They're getting a different candidate. They're interviewing in a different way.
Yeah.
All of those things now give them this true roadmap by which now to follow. And, it's based on fact versus, it's hard to believe, fiction.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where you see the success of it in the business world is the companies that come to mind that you think of putting the employee first or data collection first and letting that then drive the decisions of that company. Wegmans, for example, what was it, number 2
Yeah,
now
it's
with
one of my
Forbes.
faves. Yes.
And then you look at the Amazons, the Googles of the world that is out there, where they then actively and proactively try to figure out what do the employees want, what is it that they need, what is then really a good match for this particular job and this job description versus my opinion as to what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's great if your opinion matched up with the data, but let the data, speak to it. And really just take the time to initiative to figure out what the data even says. Because again, with this report, I think we found that what the owners, the high CEOs thought about that particular company and their employees wasn't necessarily reflective in the data itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have the good fortune to go and deliver that. I know you are conveniently busy,
Yeah,
and I have to be the bearer of that news. So it should be very interesting because again, I think the more, I just finished rereading. I want to emphasize immunity to change.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was fascinated to learn about how we have this natural filter over our brain that if we can't pattern something or if it's overwhelming, we shortcut to threat.
Yeah. Yep.
And, what I always do whenever I have to deliver this type of difficult news is I always just do a cursory, reminder of how we interpret information that doesn't necessarily fall within the confines
Right.
of what it is that we want to hear.
Right.
And it's listening from that growth mindset, right?
Yep.
Because I know they're going to listen from the fixed mindset. And it is going to be hurtful and it is going to be, and then they're going to come back and say, but we're so profitable.
Right. I know. It's the same thing again with health. So you're told, oh, you could benefit by exercising a little bit more, going to the gym a little bit more. I don't want to do it, right? It's more work. I got to change my lifestyle. But look at what the end result is, right? You do feel better. You gain that much more strength and that more vitality. And that's the same thing, again, from the company standpoint, I feel, is that, yeah, you didn't want to hear that news, but look at how you caught it in advance before it really culminated in these issues. And look at how much better you're going to be afterwards. You know, yeah, it was unfortunate, it sucked to hear that news right up front, but sometimes it took that shock and that just review to say, hey, I could be that much better now down the road, 2 years, 5 years from now.
And again, I think that if you can start disassociating and, you know, again, looking at the cruise ship and saying, and I think that's what Wegmans does so well, what type of mindset does that cruise ship have to have in order to successfully represent a joyful experience for both their internal customers and their external customers? And again, taking it out of your individual mindset and making this collective vision
Right.
of how you see, and isn't really what the vision and mission is supposed to be, versus these lines on a wall or these phrases that you see in waiting rooms that very, very few employers actually prescribe to. And over the course of the past 3 months, I've just had this personal journal, and I've just been doing something that from a PhD standpoint would make you insane. I've just been doing these scratch marks, right? But it's been very, very interesting because over the course of my past 3 months of collection, every single time a leader, an owner, an employer, a senior level person was backed up against the wall, all right, they went back to their mindset versus the company mindset. So you can't really say you're living your vision and mission if you don't give a response back to a person and say, you know what, this is how we do things here.
Yeah.
It doesn't fall within our belief system. This isn't how we behave. This ship is a tribe, okay? This ship has very individual characteristics. And it was interesting that these companies are great companies and they're very passionate about their talent brand and their initiative. But it's very confusing neurologically for an employee if you're always going back to this command center versus this command center.
Yeah, it's like, which one do you want? Do you want me to do what the company's telling me to do, or is it what you want me to tell you to do? And it's a situation that, I don't know, a confused mind doesn't know how to operate. And it's just be clear to me what it is that you want, but sometimes that's where that extra analysis comes in, you know. So the data now shows that employees are confused. So what do you want to do? Do you want to revamp your mission statement? Do you now teach it more? Do you change your training technique? All these different things, because if you can now change one thing at that high level, you might then see some of that trickle down to then all the employees in the future.
And I definitely think, you know, because I know, you know, our time together is always so quick and God knows we could go on forever and ever and ever. But I think that, you know, what my responses would be to the individuals who touch base with me, and again, primarily in that organizational space, HR space type of thing, is that my response would be to survey or not to survey would be absolutely do not survey if you don't have a process by which you can clearly communicate the intent of this from conception to completion.
Yeah. Yep.
And please know you have us as a resource. Many people come to us and ask us to do this type of data crunching.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're under our brain-based coaching, whether they're under our brain-based recruiting, it doesn't matter. If you're looking for an outside counsel, and we're very unique and innovative in this human capital space for sure.
Yeah.
Know that you can come to us. I mean, if you want us to look at your surveys or to help you plan out a process by which you can really get a true sense.
Yeah.
But be prepared to communicate it. Be prepared to follow up with next steps. Otherwise, this is like going to the gym and not working out and taking a shower and going home.
Yeah.
You've absolutely done nothing but piss off your muscles because you've done nothing to advance your initiative.
Right. And it's really wasting your time then. And I think it's a great opportunity where it doesn't have to be, oh, you need to do this, this, and this. It's an opportunity to collaborate and work together and figure out from our standpoint or the data standpoint, what is it that the data is suggesting is the issue, and then having a conversation with you and figuring out what then is the best remedy going forward.
Without a doubt. So, do you agree with my to survey or not to survey? Do you have any profound parting words?
No, I don't think there's necessarily any profound words for it. I think it really is a big challenge for people because it's the same thing like going for your yearly physical or going for a checkup. Like, there's a chance that now when I get that done, it's not going to be the results that I want, and I don't want to hear that. But if you don't get it done, what then is brewing underneath the surface? What's happening under there? What issues could be arising? And I think it's an opportunity where taking the initiative you should be applauded for, wanting to then survey your people, your customers, your clients, your employees, just the general company itself. But then also be open-minded that here are the results that we have gathered. Data is objective, and how can that help us and help you going forward?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, mindset matters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everything, mindset matters. So how you approach this.
Right?
If you give a survey and do nothing with it, you've successfully executed on a fixed mindset,
And close yourself off from what could be a potential solution down the road.
without a doubt. And God, a healthier, happier, lower maintenance company,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I'm loving the pink bow tie.
Thank
I have
you.
my Wonder Woman one on. And so thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And, you know, we'll of course be putting this into a blog format. I know we get a lot of requests for recordings, so certainly anybody who would like more information in regards to that, feel more than free. And at the end of the day, we'll look forward to continuing connecting with you at this
Yeah.
point. All of our socials, everything along those lines. And thanks so much for joining.